Welcome everyone to today's panel discussion, Transition and Breakaway Movement in the Wealth Management and RIA Space. We'll spend the next 55 minutes discussing the recruiting landscape of 2020 and what's ahead for 2021. Probably one of the most important and rapidly changing topics at these types of conferences is, what does a recruiting environment look like? This is not just an important topic for advisors looking to break away, but also for internal and external recruiters, RIA aggregators, wealth management firms, succession plan candidates, and leaders across the entire industry. With COVID-19 being front and center this year, the recruiting world had to quickly adapt. Unsurprisingly, the time period saw a host of firms find new and innovative ways to grow, acquire talent, and create unique ways to transition in a virtual world. And although there was a marked decline in the first few months of 2020, roughly 90% of expected rep movement has still occurred this year, according to Discovery data. Many of these moves were within the independent channel, which saw the most successful first half of 2020, with a gain of 1,385 reps, compared that to a net loss of 506 reps in the wirehouse space. Notably, following the 2008 market crash, a number of rep moves were at a historic high. If a similar trend is seen in the market post-pandemic, could a spike in the number of moves be expected in the coming months? Today, we want to see what some of the industry's best and brightest minds have to say about 2020 and what is to come for 2021 as it relates to those trends in recruiting. My name is Greg Banasz. I'm a managing director and head of business development over at Steward Partners, and I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. In alphabetical order, our panel consists of Kip Caffey, CEO of Resurgent Advisors. Welcome, Kip.
Thanks,
Andrew
Greg.
Daniels, managing principal and head of business development of Commonwealth Financial. Hello, Andrew.
Thank you for having me.
Jim Gold, CEO of Steward Partners, and full disclosure, Jim and I are part of the senior leadership team together over at Steward Partners. Great to see you, Jim.
Thank you, Greg.
Craig Pirtle, Chief Strategy Officer of B. Riley Wealth Management. Nice to see you, Craig.
Thank you, Greg.
Smith, Director of Recruiting and Business Development at Janney Montgomery Scott. Welcome as well, Jeff.
Thanks, Greg. Good to see you.
Every company here has representation throughout the summit, but before we begin our conversation today, I want to give the panelists a 45-second introduction to their firm and give some key company statistics regarding recruiting for this year. So let's just go in reverse order. Jeff Smith, I'll start with you.
Well, thanks, Greg. It's great to see you again, albeit virtually. For all these who don't know me, my name is Jeff Smith. I'm the Director of Recruiting and Business Development at Janney. I began my career at Janney in the summer of 2012 when I took over the Washington, D.C. complex. 4 years later, I was asked by my current boss, Jerry Lombard, who's the president of our private client group, to take over our recruiting and business development efforts in Philadelphia for Janney. So a little bit about Janney Montgomery Scott. We have rich history. Our roots date back to 1832. We're currently owned by Penn Mutual Life Insurance Company, and we have been since 1982. We're currently and have always been privately held. Janney's added diversity to Penn Mutual's portfolio is one of the reasons for their strong ratings and financial strength. We have an A+ superior A and best rating, AA3 excellent by Moody's, an A+ strong S&P rating. And Janney has approximately 860 financial advisors in 120 offices, all east of the Mississippi River. About 85% of our revenue comes from our FAs within our private client group. And so we have a very FA client-friendly culture. And our FAs currently average about 115 million in assets and about 750,000 in production. As a result of the FA-focused culture that we built, many FAs have taken notice and have moved to Janney. And despite the pandemic, per McLaughlin, Janney was the most active pound-for-pound recruiting firm during the first half of 2020.
Great.
So, Greg, that's a little bit about me and a little bit about Janney.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Craig, I'll turn over to you.
Thank you, Greg. This is Craig Pirtle. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at B. Riley Wealth Management. B. Riley Wealth Management is part of B. Riley Financial, which is a Los Angeles-based firm. Core competencies are investment banking, capital markets, research, and many others, which makes us a pretty dynamic firm on a proprietary basis. We've got about 200 financial advisors. Year to date, we've recruited about $1.5 billion in new assets. On a real more selective basis, we're kind of positioned where we don't really grow by necessary numbers, obviously with mindful on revenue and profitability, but at the same time, quality first. So we look at advisors' careers and their steadfastness in their careers and how they service their clients. We take a lot of considerations on where they come from and how they got to their point of success in their practices. So B. Riley's a national firm. We've got a footprint across the country, major locations, again, Los Angeles, New York, and Washington, D.C. So thank you very much, Greg.
Great, thank you. Mr. Gold.
Thanks, Greg. Jim Gold. I'm the CEO, one of the co-founders of Steward Partners. We just celebrated our 7th anniversary. My background and many of the background of the folks on the management team was at Smith Barney. So I grew up in sort of the traditional wirehouse world. I was a financial advisor, went into branch management and spent some time in branch management there. I think what we've tried to do at Steward is to really build something unique. And we talk about independence with infrastructure and a true best of both worlds opportunity where we're going to give the resources that you're used to at a wirehouse. We're going to give you all the benefits of independence and then remove the detriments of both of those. So flexible model, we have a W-2 channel, we have a 1099 channel. With recent transactions announced, we've crossed $20 billion in assets in 7 years. Looking forward to 2021, expected to be about $150 million in revenue, as for next year. And really proud of the fact that the firm has been recognized as best places to work 4 years in a row in Washington, D.C., and won numerous accolades that are actually sponsored by our employees recognizing the firm, which tells us that the culture part's working well. Thank you. Excited to be here.
Thanks, Jim. Andrew?
Good afternoon. Andrew Daniels. I am a 23-year veteran of Commonwealth Financial Network and one of the owning managing principals of the firm. Chief Business Development Officer. Commonwealth is a 41-year-old privately held national registered investment advisor with an accommodative broker-dealer built in. Today, we support some 2,000 independent advisors in about 950 practices around the country. They have average production of ballpark 700,000 per producer and are principally doing fee-based asset management. Of those roughly 2,000, there's about 150 today who are pure fee-only advisors leveraging Commonwealth's infrastructure. We support them from 2 home offices, one in Boston and one in San Diego. Today, collectively, there's about 185 billion in assets under management and another 300 billion in assets under advisement. And I'm very proud that we are a 7 out of 7 time winner of J.D. Power's Independent Advisor Satisfaction Award. I think very telling to the service model of our firm, and it's a pleasure to be here with these gentlemen.
Great, thanks. And Mr. Caffey.
Thanks, Greg. I'm Kip Caffey, the CEO of Resurgent Financial Advisors. We're the smallest and the youngest of all these firms. Our founding goes all the way back to 2018, toward the end of the year. Our strategy is to grow by acquiring independent RIA firms, primarily in the Southeast. We did 2 acquisitions in 2019. We have 3 that will close by year end this year. We also grow by recruiting. We were able to add a very successful financial advisor to one of our existing offices earlier this year. So if all goes well, we will have 5 offices and about $500 million in assets under management as of the end of the year. We have a very robust acquisition pipeline, which is a new development, something we're going to talk about a little bit later in the course of this. And I can thank COVID-19 and the pandemic for enhancing our pipeline rather dramatically. I'm an old Southeastern regional firm guy. I was at J.C. Bradford for a long time, was a partner there, and then was at Robinson Humphrey. So my orientation is a regional firm, and we're trying to keep it with a strong culture driven by the FAs. We are only in the financial advisory business, no other business lines at all. And we are majority owned by the employees of the firm.
Great. Thank you. Okay, let's begin our discussion. We've broken our conversation into 3 segments going into COVID-19 earlier this year, wrapping up 2020, and then looking ahead at 2021 and beyond. So let's just start with what things were looking like back early in the year. Upon learning of the pandemic, in the first quarter of 2020, what were some of the immediate thoughts people had about the year from a recruiting standpoint? Kip, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Greg. I would say it hit the fan pretty hard in March, and we had some terrific initiatives underway that came to a screeching halt. Uncertainty is not good for markets, and it's certainly not good for recruiting or acquisitions. We had some deals in the pipeline that we expected to close certainly in the first half of the year, and all of those were put on hold for understandable reasons. So a fair amount of fear and panic and the frustration that comes from uncertainty really were what dominated. What's been interesting since then, though, is how quickly things have rebounded. We've seen all of our deals come back online. We've seen our pipeline grow very dramatically, as I mentioned earlier. So it's really business as usual, but we were out of business from a recruiting and acquisition point of view for at least 3 or 4 months. It seems to have come back. One thing that I've seen is the volatility and all the stuff that stemmed from the pandemic, the market downturn, the volatility, fear came back into the recruiting and acquisition market. There were a number of people I talked with last year who said, you know, I really like your deal structure, Kip. I like you. I like the culture. I like the strategy that you've laid out. I like the support resources. I ought to do that deal. But gosh, every quarter my AUM goes up, my fees go up, my incomes goes up, and my clients don't call because they're happy. I don't want to jinx the streak. Well, the streak has been broken. And so a lot of people, I think, have said, now may be the right time for me to make a move.
Great. Jim, I think you have some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. I think if you look at it, I think everyone being forced to work from home is obviously a completely unique environment. But I think for many advisors, it really showed them how little they actually get from their firm. And the fact that they're really working remotely and they're able to run their business and they're not in the office and magically the business is still intact and they're doing well. So I think like every challenge, there are silver linings. And I think when we predominantly recruit from the wirehouse firms. And I think when there's no one else in the office and you have to call your client and say, hey, I've moved firms, I want to come see you. There may be some reluctance face-to-face because of COVID, which is understandable, but there's a lot of reluctance to see a complete stranger who's calling from your office who got reassigned your account. So I think we were able to move quickly to work remotely. We've been working remotely since, knocking on wood, we've had no issues at all. The business is very strong. And actually, we're going to have a record year this year in recruiting during this time.
Great. Andrew, let me turn the conversation a little bit differently. How did advisors and teams respond to some of the new ways of conducting research and due diligence and, some of the new opportunities now that were available to them versus, some of the original face-to-face meetings? I mean, how did that change for you guys?
It's been interesting. At first, I have to say I was probably a little bit nervous not being a technologist, making a shift to the Zoom world. But it almost happened seamlessly and didn't feel unnatural at all, to the point where today I'm more apt to engage a prospective advisor through Zoom than I would through the telephone. And I think that has benefited all of us from a recruiting standpoint because you instantly get more personal connectivity as you're engaging somebody face-to-face, even over maybe hundreds or even thousands of miles. So the Zoom shift, I think, has been a boon for both prospective advisors and recruiting firms. And I think that is here to stay. It's going to be interesting when and if things settle down to see how much people are really interested in getting on an airplane again when you can conduct so much more superior due diligence in a virtual world. And I have to be honest that gives me a little bit of concern vis-a-vis Commonwealth. I think one of our huge selling points is the culture and community of our firm. And we were really good at conveying that in a real world. And it's a much more complex thing to convey the energy of the home office and the humanity of the home office when you're meeting with 9 people for a virtual home office visit than when you're walking through an office that houses 750 home office employees and you feel that energy. So there's going to be some acclimatization that has to happen, but technology made this significantly easier than I would have thought at the outset. And my only regret is that I hadn't bought Zoom stock at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah, it definitely has shaken up the recruiting world and definitely made a lot of people have to make some quick adjustments. Jeff, I'm curious, how have advisors fared in this transition process under this new kind of protocol or process, we'll call it, versus pre-COVID times?
Well, statistically, there's really hasn't been a noticeable difference in the ramp up during the pandemic. Yeah. Our philosophy, and I think I speak for everybody today, has been and continues to be that the bond between the FA and their client is what's important. And that's been proven by the results of our COVID recruits, as I'll call them. And it just shows you that clients simply don't want to be without their advisor during turbulent times. And they continue to value that FA relationship, and it shows in the results. If anything, our newly hired financial advisors have experienced achieving their asset goals at a faster clip than those we hired pre-COVID. But we're also finding that due to COVID, FAs are embracing technology more so than ever before. And today's a perfect example, Greg. If it weren't for the pandemic, we'd be in New York, you'd be behind a podium, we'd be behind a table somewhere in a hotel room in Manhattan. This year it's virtual. So our recruits have taken advantage of technology as well, including our digital onboarding. Clients now don't have to sign volumes of paperwork, make copies for their records, and return via mail original documents. And when you see their accounts move in a few weeks, and today via their computer or their cell phone, they can transfer their accounts in a few days with far less effort. So we've been really pleased with the results of our newest FAs that they're posting. So,
can I add one thing in there too, which I think is important, particularly for the folks watching this? I would say that one of the silver linings of COVID has been client accessibility. So COVID kind of keeping everybody at home has actually made transition easier because you've been able to get a hold of your clients rather than having them on vacation in their summer home all over the place. I think Jeff's right. Technology has positively impacted everything, but so too has immediate access to your clients.
Sure. Craig, I want to bring you into the conversation. You want to shed some light on this?
Yeah, no, a lot of good points just made previously to this. We took a lot of time to invest in and deepen the bench on our transition team, invest in technology to better communicate with the clients. But I think one of the points that resonates here that's been brought up, and I emphasize it as well, is the contact level with the advisors in the transitions, in the recruiting process, the amount of detail, it supersedes and goes beyond what was more common. And that was, as Jeff just brought up, doing a meeting in New York in a restaurant, or the branch manager being solely responsible on the W-2 side, things like that. It is now a full firm effort, getting as many executives involved to show something that I think really is the most important thing that we've all discovered during COVID. Having the access to resources, access to people that support the firm, people that run the firm, and having a much more closer connectivity to the firm, so they then in turn can bring that to their clients and show that. I think there was a big gap in the big four or big five wirehouses out there that, the clients, meaning the advisors, felt to their firms in going through this COVID crisis. So I think they were out there seeking boutique options and opportunities, or going independent, or going RIA, one of the three. And I think if you can show them the detail, the attention, and the access, it's a winning combination to continue to recruit during COVID.
Very true. So yeah, let's talk about a little bit more about wrapping up this year and really what has recruiting looked like. I mean, going into the fourth quarter of 2020, have there been any permanent changes to your recruiting strategy? Andrew, I'll start with you.
Well, I think I touched on one earlier, just the use of Zoom now superseding some of our more traditional ways of meeting with folks. I think there's a lot of maybe less about recruiting and more about transition. We are able to do the transition work much more efficiently than we were before. And necessity breeds invention, right? And so being forced into this, all of us in a hurry, meant that we had to think on the fly about all of our processes, how we're talking to advisors, how we're sharing with them the values of our firms, and then ultimately how we're transitioning them and their clients and their practices to us. And I think the biggest boon that's going to come out of COVID is technological evolution across the spectrum. And I'm very excited about that. It's going to make advisors' lives easier. It's going to make clients' lives easier. And ultimately, I think it's going to make our lives easier. So again, there's a lot of tragedy that's come from this, but there's also a lot of really powerful, helpful things for our part of the industry that I find exciting.
Kip, I know you have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I do think it has fundamentally changed how we go after it. I still think that whenever I can, I want to be in front of a recruit. I want to be in front of an acquisition because it's just easier to make the sale in person. At the end of the day, it's a credibility sale. They've got to feel good about it. But as Andrew said, we now have the tools that are widely accepted for communication more broadly. And so what I found works very, very well is I'll set up a Zoom call with a recruit or with an acquisition target, and I'll have my head of operations on there. I'll have my software person on there. I'll have my CFO on there. I'll have my compliance person on there. So ask any question that you want to ask. These are the people you'll be working with. And further to Andrew's point, when you get to transition, when you've made the sale, when they are joining you, you do the same thing again, and you can really have a connection that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily meet all those people in the way we used to do things. And I think it's much, much better.
You know, although some of the wirehouses have stepped up their recruiting efforts again, I'm curious, as from some people's points of view, had the migration to non-wirehouse options accelerated or taken a pause going into 2020? Jeff, you want to give some commentary on that?
We've been coming off 3 very successful years in recruiting, 2017, 18, and 19. And coming into 20 was just business as usual. As many of you all do today, we put a lot of our effort in home office experience. And at Janney, we believe this is to our advantage. Having FAs come to Philly, spend a day with us, learn more about Janney, meet senior management, and learn our story. So when the pandemic hit, it became very clear, and rightfully so, that FAs were focused on their practice and their family's health. And so like many of our competitors, we adopted the virtual home office model, like many of you. To be honest, March through May, they were very challenging, to say the least. In-person HOVs disappeared. Our FAs and branch managers were really trying to wrap their arms around the virtual home office experience. And things dramatically changed in the early summer. After turning our focus to the well-being of our employees, their families, and our clients for literally the entire spring, we experienced a very strong pace of FA activity, visiting Janney since June, including a really robust October where we had about 21 FAs visit Janney, including our first live in-person HOV since March. So we're actually having people in the office, and many of these FAs were from flyers. So despite the pandemic, I'm confident that the industry recruiting will remain active and robust, and Janney will have a very strong 2020, exceeding last year's results. And based on our pipeline, I think we should continue the momentum heading into 21.
So from an industry standpoint, what's recruiting success going to look like this year versus 2018, 2019, where many of us only had 3 quarters to do that? Craig, you want to shed some light on that? Yeah, no, I think, the migration, back to that point, is definitely in full swing. I think more so than ever. I think it goes to the points that were made as well about the use of technology, the use of the virtual meetings and processes that we've all had to adopt and have been put in place. So I think the momentum's still there. I don't think it will change. But again, I think coming out of 2020, and this point's been made as well, that we will continue to do things as we've done them. Initial meetings for, they save on cost, they save on time, they get the advisor's interest level at a faster rate. You can make an evaluation whether or not you're wasting your time or you're actually generating interest to the advisor's potential opportunity to join the firm. So there's going to be a lot that comes out of it that will remain going beyond 2020. But I do think the momentum is still there and will continue going forward. And continuing with that, Jim, tell me again, what's recruiting success look like for 2020 versus the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, we anticipate we're basically at a record year currently, and we think we have some more commitments in the pipeline. Not from any of the firms on the screen here, so we're all still friendly. But I think, I would echo that, something that's so obvious, I think is important to think about with the benefit of Zoom, right? How many times have all of us and the recruit try to figure out, oh, when can we get together and when can we grab lunch? Oh no, next Tuesday doesn't work. How about, oh no, I can't do dinner. Now with Zoom, it's like you can get on the phone in 20 minutes and say, hey, I got a half an hour. Let's jump on Zoom now. So because we're not traveling as much and they're not traveling as much, the real leverage from that is almost immediate access to have a conversation that previously might have taken some time, right? And I'm sure all the recruits we speak to at some point want to talk to the senior management and the folks running these firms, and you have lots of people want to meet you, hopefully, and not always the time to do it. So I think it's really helped ramp up our efforts. I think for us, we also launched the 1099 division this year and had a very successful join into that. And we just announced our first M&A transaction as well. So I think we're looking at recruiting as sort of a three-pronged attack now from the early days of Steward. And your comments are very reminiscent for us. We started 7 years ago. And, I would say there's more people on the screen on this call right now than were at Steward 7 years ago. So I know that feeling and wish you the best of luck, sir. But yeah, I think the opportunity is really a three-pronged attack now. And I think a terrible thing like COVID and a worldwide event like this, it gives people pause. And there's plenty of people that are saying, you know what, I thought I wanted to work a little longer, then maybe I don't want to work that much longer anymore. And I want to look for a succession opportunity. Or, hey, I'm running an RIA and I don't feel like I have to scale to deal with the regulators and everything else going on. Maybe I'm better off rolling up to another firm that can provide those resources. So I think it gives all of us a tremendous opportunity out there to continue to do what we're doing and get market share. And we're always excited when our independent brethren are doing well because we're all in the same armada, in the same way. So hopefully we all continue to win.
Great. Thanks. And now getting into probably the most important segment here is looking ahead at 2021 and beyond. So I'm really interested to hear what a lot of people here have to say about, forward-looking statements and recruiting and where it's heading. What do you think is going to be significantly different regarding recruiting and advisor transition? Andrew, I'll start with you. I know you and I were chatting about this the other day, and I think you had some pretty good comments about it.
So one thing that really strikes me from the perspective of the independent channel is, or maybe from the perspective of all of our channels, is I think we're only at the very front end of a significant breakaway movement, and the move to independence and the different choices that are available just on this screen alone, I think is really indicative of where the industry is going. I'm extremely excited about 2021 from a breakaway standpoint, and I think Commonwealth is positioned extremely well. We focused on this concept of glide path, where I think most advisors today at wirehouses still have a significant enough portion of their book that is transactional or trail based that they're not ready today to be completely fee only, but they're ready to make a move. And I'm excited about our infrastructure where you can come to Commonwealth dually registered and change your infrastructure or change your spots over time without changing your infrastructure. And I think the future is unwritten, but I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about advisor movement in 2021 and beyond. And I think to Jeff's point, the middle of the year was a little bit sketchy. It felt slow, people were kind of recalibrating, but as we got to the end, in the middle and end of summer, folks said, all right, I got my feet back underneath me. Let's get back to what we were doing and let's channel our energies on a forward-looking path. And I think that bodes well for all of us.
Yeah, Jim, not just from Steward's perspective, but also from an industry's perspective, what do you think is going to be significantly different going forward into 2021 and beyond?
Well, I think as Andrew said, I would agree with his comments completely that I think if you look at the industry 10 or 15 years from now, you won't recognize it what it looked like today versus what it's going to look like then. And I think for the advisors considering a move, the great news is there's never been more options. There's never been more choices out there. that are very, very unique. And I think people are recognizing that, listen, everyone has great technology, everyone has a great platform, and the best advisors can run their business anywhere. And I think that makes it more competitive for all of us. And we need to make sure we're delivering something that is unique. And so again, that's a benefit for the advisors out there. So I think the movement is going to accelerate. If you look at the total wealth market in the United States today, is a little over $20 trillion in assets. The wirehouses hold about 7 trillion of that number. You take that number and apply a low single digit rate of return on it, the market share opportunity is $35 trillion over the next 15 years. So I think the sort of conglomeration of all these factors, adding in demographics, and the average advisor in the industry is close to 60 years old now, and the new generation coming behind them, absolutely, statistically, the new generation has much more interest in being in an independent firm with cutting edge technology and a lot of opportunity than sort of, their senior partner's way of doing business, right? As one of the guys said to me, he goes, I want to be, if I'm getting trained as a doctor, I want to use a laser beam, not a scalpel. And I think that's where the industry has to make sure that we're delivering is a cutting edge experience, no pun intended.
Hey, Jeff, taking a look at transition packages and what they might look like, if different at all, going into 2021. What are some of your thoughts and comments regarding forward-looking, transition package for advisors, for teams, and maybe even some M&A activity?
Yeah, well, I can't say whether we'll make adjustments or not. It really comes down to what the market will bear. But trust me, we're constantly reviewing every offer for every candidate. I would like to point out that as the pandemic was in full gear, many of our competitors were looking for ways to lower the deals. We made a decision to take a different path and actually increase the transition offer for FAs producing north of 750,000. As far as the industry goes, I'm surprised at some of the offers I've seen, those who are considering Janney as well as other firms. In some cases, if the transition offer is the most important aspect of a move for an FA, we've advised them to take the offer from the other firm. But our goal is to make a fair and competitive offer to recruits while acting as a steward for our firm. And although we have our standard offer for each candidate, we have each candidate's unique in a different set of circumstances that we take into consideration. As far as the industry is concerned, I don't believe you'll see deals fall anytime soon. It's just a very competitive environment right now for the best talent. However, I don't realistically see how much higher they can go.
Yeah. I'm curious too, what are some of the important considerations, about transitions that advisors have brought up this year that will become important for next year's recruiting success? Kip, you want to talk about that a little bit?
I do, but I want to backtrack just slightly and talk more broadly about what I think is going to happen next year in the RIA space. And I'm stealing statistics that others have gathered, but there are something like 30,000 independent RIA firms in the country. Most of them are under 100 million in AUM. And according to DeVoe and Company, the average age of the owners is 64. Last year, there were about 240 acquisition transactions out of those 30,000. The year before, there were only about 200. So it has been very much a seller's market rather than a buyer's market. I think it's going to be a record year next year. I think this year will be a record year. I think 2021, the doors will be blown off, because I think what will happen is, as fear and volatility have caused people to rethink the equation, maybe I need a bigger platform, maybe I need succession planning, I think you're going to see a lot more people doing transactions. There's a limited number of buyers out there, and when they see other firms doing transactions, I think that will lead to others wanting to do transactions, and eventually it will flip and it'll become more of a buyer's market. But I think there will be a flood of transactions next year, to the point what's going to be critical to them, what's going to be important. Culture is going to be very important. Independence. Jim was quite articulate earlier, talking about how important independence is, but also how important infrastructure is. That's what I hear from everybody I talk to. Tell me what you're going to do for me, but tell me what you're not going to make me do. And it's two sides of the coin. And You've got to be articulate in addressing that. If you don't have a good answer, they don't have an interest. They won't go forward. But I think those are going to be the key themes: is tell me what services you're going to provide, and tell me what what handcuffs, if any, you're going to put on me. Tell me what my can't do's are. That's going to be critical as these folks make a decision. Jim, do you see something different? I'm curious.
No, I agree. And I think for us at Steward, we focus on that. And we also, you made a good point earlier, Kip, is every partner that joins us gets equity in the firm. So everyone is a partner at the firm. Everyone is an owner at the firm. So you lose that me against the firm dynamic and that tug of war over, the firm did this to me, so now I'm gonna try and pay back the firm this way. And I think what's indicative there of that, and I think the culture is 100% of our recruits this year were referred to us by existing partners at the firm. And that to me tells me we're doing something right. When people say, hey, I met this person at a golf outing, or back in the day, or hey, this person's my old office. I told them I've never been happier. My best days are ahead of me again. So I think absolutely having a unique offering, but you're right. I mean, we talk about the independence with infrastructure all the time, because if they want to do it on their own, they don't need us, right? If they want to be, and I say, I don't think you want to be ordering coffee and worrying about paying the cable bill and why is the printer not working, right? You come in and have that done for you. You're used to that. So try to give them, spend the most time doing what you're good at, which is growing the business and talking to your clients.
Right.
Hey, Craig, I want to bring you in. What do you think are some important, considerations and key components going into next year's recruiting success and beyond?
A lot of great points made already. And by the way, if I have a fly on my head like Mike Pence did during the debate, somebody please tell me. I do have birds and everything coming over, so it could even get worse than a fly. But anyway, look, I think some of the things I really pulled out from these comments recently were infrastructure and what are you going to do for me? And all these, they add up to a lot of the opportunities that these firms provide that are on this call and the leaders of these firms. 25 years ago, I think we saw a far more prevalent and unique opportunity to not have to choose the big four or the big five or whatever it may be. There were boutique firms that had powerful infrastructure and a lot of capabilities, a lot of history, and a lot of quality advisors. And they stayed at a certain size, and then we hit that trend of M&As and getting bought out. I think we're seeing the next evolution of these new choices in the unique boutique culture with powerful infrastructure, with resources, with great leadership, innovative ideas, and many ways to set up a practice that an advisor is looking to choose as they evolve into their next phase and their choices in their careers. So I think that's what we're seeing. I think it was Jim that said we won't recognize it here over the next 10, 20 years as it is today. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. So I think there is a unique evolution. I think we have a lot of cutting edge firms right here on this call that will be those leaders in that space as we go forward.
Andrew, anything to add?
I wanted to echo on something I think Kip said, or maybe we were all touched on it in one way, but I do think as we look forward to 2021 and beyond, that one of the key questions that prospective advisors are going to have for any of us is, what are you doing to invest in me? And I think many of them, most of them, if not all of them, are looking to move because they're concerned that what they're seeing is the parent firm more interested in its own return and less interested in them. And I know it's true at Commonwealth. I believe it's probably true with each of your firms. We're not confused. We work for the financial advisor, not the other way around. And that's a huge distinction, and I think a critical one as we look forward and offer ourselves as homes and support mechanisms for prospective advisors of any ilk.
Jeff, any closing comments?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious. A lot of the FAs have a lot of choices, right? And how they want to grow their practice and service their clients best. And ultimately, that's good for the FA. It's good for the client. It's a very competitive world, which is, very good. So, we're looking forward to seeing our growth. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the industry materializes over the next 10 years.
And on that note, That brings us to the end of our panel discussion today. I want to thank our 5 panelists for a very insightful and informative session. We hope you saw the value in this content and invite you to stop by any of the virtual booths set up by our presenters' firms here today at the AdvisorHub 2020 Summit. Enjoy the rest of the conference, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.